A homeless boy stood in front of a billionaire's mansion, refusing thousands of dollars worth of food. "We can't accept it," the 12-year-old said calmly. The billionaire stared at him in disbelief. "You're hungry." "I know." "Then why refuse?" The boy's next words left everyone speechless. "Because charity ends. And then, we're hungry again." The billionaire had spent his whole life believing money could solve every problem. He was about to discover he had been wrong. 3 weeks earlier.
"Stop him! Get that boy away from the gate!"
The security guards rushed forward as a skinny homeless boy spun across the sidewalk, his worn-out sneakers scraping against the pavement. But before they could grab him, a sound echoed from the second floor of the mansion. A laugh. Not just any laugh. It was the laugh of a little girl who hadn't smiled in nearly 2 years. The guards froze. Inside the mansion, 10-year-old Emily Cole pressed her face against the bedroom window, laughing so hard, tears rolled down her cheeks. Outside, the homeless boy didn't even notice. He continued dancing, spinning, jumping, pretending to trip over invisible obstacles, making ridiculous faces. And for the first time in a very long time, Emily forgot she was trapped in a wheelchair. At that exact moment, billionaire Richard Cole stepped into his daughter's room. He stopped in his tracks. His eyes widened. "Emily?" The girl turned toward him. "Dad, look at him!" Richard looked outside. A homeless boy, dirty clothes, messy hair, a backpack that looked older than he was. Yet somehow, his daughter was laughing. Richard hadn't seen that expression since before the accident. Before the day everything changed. Before the car crash that took Emily's mother and left Emily unable to walk. The smile vanished slightly as memories returned. Richard felt a sharp pain in his chest. For 2 years, he had spent millions. The best doctors, the best therapists, the best treatments. Nothing worked. Yet a homeless boy dancing on the sidewalk had accomplished what money couldn't buy. The security guards looked at Richard through the window, waiting for instructions. Richard slowly raised his hand, then shook his head. "No." The guard stepped back. The boy continued dancing. Emily laughed again. And for the first time in years, Richard felt a tiny spark of hope. The next afternoon, Emily sat by the window, waiting. 3 o'clock passed, then 4. No boy. The smile disappeared from her face. Richard noticed immediately. "You expecting someone?" Emily shrugged. "No." But her eyes stayed fixed on the gate. 5 minutes later, a familiar figure appeared. The homeless boy. Emily practically squealed. "He's back!" Richard couldn't help smiling. The boy immediately started another performance, this time pretending to be a superhero fighting invisible monsters. Emily laughed so hard she nearly fell from her wheelchair. Richard watched quietly. Something felt different about this boy. Most people wanted something. Money, food, attention. But this boy never approached the gate, never begged, never asked for anything. He simply danced, then left. For 3 weeks, the routine continued. Every day, same time, same energy, same mission. Make Emily smile. One evening during dinner, Richard noticed something unusual. Emily was actually eating. For months she barely touched her food. Now she was hungry, happy, talking, alive. "Dad?"
Yes.
Richard looked up.
Do you think the
Yes?
dancing boy has a name?
"Do you think the dancing boy has a name?"
Can you
Richard
ask him?
chuckled. "I suppose he does. Can you ask him?" Richard stared at his daughter. There was something in her eyes he hadn't seen in years. Hope. The next afternoon, Richard stood outside the gate waiting. The homeless boy arrived exactly on time. Before he could start dancing, Richard approached him. The boy immediately stopped. His smile disappeared. His body tensed, as if expecting trouble. Richard crouched slightly. "Relax." The boy looked nervous. "Am I in trouble?" "No." "Then why are you talking to me?" The question surprised Richard. "What do you mean?" The boy shrugged. Rich people don't usually talk to people like me." Richard didn't know how to answer. After a moment, he extended his hand. "I'm Richard." The boy stared at the hand, slowly shook it. "Jaden." "So your name is Jaden?" The boy nodded. Richard glanced toward the mansion. Emily was watching, smiling. "Why do you keep coming here?" Jaden looked confused. "To dance." "I know that. But why?" The answer came instantly. "Because she smiles." Richard blinked. "That's it?" Jaden shrugged. "Yeah. You don't want money?" "No." "Food?" "No." "Anything?" Jaden shook his head. "When someone smiles because of me, it feels nice." Richard stared at him. The answer felt too simple, too honest, too pure. Most adults weren't that genuine, yet this child seemed completely sincere. "How old are you?" 12. "Where do your parents live?" For the first time, Jaden's eyes dropped. "They don't." Silence. Richard immediately regretted asking. "I'm sorry." Jaden forced a smile. "It's okay." Richard noticed something. Pain. A lot of it. Hidden behind that smile. Before he could ask another question, Jaden suddenly pointed toward the window. Emily waved enthusiastically. Jaden waved back, then smiled. "See?" Richard looked confused. "See what?" Jaden nodded toward Emily. She smiled again. Then he started dancing. Richard stood there, speechless. That night he couldn't stop thinking about the boy.
Something wasn't adding up. Nobody was that selfless. Nobody spent hours every day entertaining a stranger for free. There had to be another reason. There just had to be. Meanwhile, across the city, Jaden returned to an abandoned warehouse hidden behind a row of old buildings. Inside were 3 younger children, cold, hungry, waiting. The smallest girl ran toward him. "Did you get anything?" Jaden smiled. "Not today." The girl's face fell. Jaden immediately reached into his backpack, pulled out 2 sandwiches. The children cheered. "Where did you get those?" "A bakery threw them away." The children devoured the food. Jaden watched silently, making sure they ate first, making sure they were okay, making sure nobody noticed he hadn't eaten all day. And miles away, billionaire Richard Cole stared out his bedroom window, thinking about a homeless boy, a smile, a mystery, and a feeling he couldn't explain. He had no idea that discovering the truth about Jaden would change all of their lives forever. Richard barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same image: Jaden dancing, Emily laughing. The contrast made no sense. One child had every advantage in life, but had lost her happiness. The other had almost nothing, yet somehow carried enough joy to share with everyone around him. The next morning, Richard called his assistant. "I need information." "On who, sir?" "The homeless boy." His assistant looked surprised. "The boy at the gate?" "Yes." "What exactly do you want to know?" "Everything." By lunchtime, the investigation had begun. By evening, Richard received an answer, and it wasn't what he expected. "We couldn't find any school records." Richard frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means he's not enrolled anywhere." "No family?" "None that we could locate." Richard leaned back. "What about shelters?" "Nothing." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, it's almost as if he's invisible." That answer bothered Richard even more. Meanwhile, Emily was waiting by the window again. The moment Jaden appeared, her face lit up. "Dad, he's here." Richard walked over. Instead of watching from a distance, he decided to step outside. Jaden was midway through pretending to fight an invisible dragon. His dramatic performance made Emily burst into laughter. When he finally finished, Richard approached. Jaden immediately stopped. "You again?" Richard smiled. "That's usually how conversations work." Jaden laughed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Richard asked the question that had been bothering him. "Where do you sleep?" Jaden's smile faded.
Why?
"Why?" Because I'm curious.
People usually become
curious when they want something. Richard crossed his arms. And what do you think I want? Jaden thought for a second. I don't know. The honesty caught Richard off guard. Finally, Jaden sighed. An old warehouse. A warehouse? Yeah. Alone? Jaden hesitated, then nodded. Richard noticed the hesitation immediately. The boy was hiding something. Before he could ask more questions, Jaden pointed toward Emily. She's waiting. Then he started dancing again. Richard watched carefully. Not the dancing. The boy. The way he constantly checked whether Emily was smiling. The way his face lit up every time she laughed. The way he seemed genuinely happy whenever she was happy. It wasn't an act. That realization unsettled Richard, because genuine kindness was something he hadn't encountered in a very long time. A few days later, Richard made a decision. He followed Jaden, keeping his distance, making sure the boy never noticed. The route shocked him. Jaden spent the afternoon collecting bottles, then helping an elderly woman carry groceries, then picking up litter from a sidewalk, then giving part of his food to a stray dog. Richard couldn't believe what he was seeing. The boy had almost nothing, yet he kept giving. Eventually, Jaden arrived at the abandoned warehouse. Richard waited until dark, then slowly approached. Voices echoed inside, children's voices. Richard froze, carefully peeking through a broken window. What he saw left him speechless. 3 younger children sat around Jaden. 1 little girl, 2 boys. They were laughing, listening, completely focused. Jaden was telling a story, using funny voices, making dramatic faces. The children laughed so hard they nearly fell over. For a few minutes, Richard forgot he was watching homeless children. He simply saw a family. Then the story ended. The smallest girl hugged Jaden. "You're the best brother ever." Richard's eyes widened. Brother? The next day, Richard approached Jaden immediately. "You lied." Jaden stiffened. "What?" "You're not alone." The color drained from the boy's face. For a moment, Richard thought he might run away. Instead, Jaden looked down. "You followed me." "Yes." "You weren't supposed to." "Who are the children?" Silence. Long silence. Finally, Jaden answered. "They aren't really my brothers and sister." "Then who are they?" "Kids." Richard frowned. "What kind of answer is that?" "The kind that's true." Jaden kicked a small stone. "I met them on the streets." "And?" "They had nobody." Richard stared. "So you took care of them?" Jaden shrugged. "Somebody had to." The simplicity of the answer hit Richard harder than expected. A 12-year-old boy had accepted a responsibility many adults would avoid. "How long?" "Almost a year." "A year?" Jaden nodded. Richard couldn't believe it. "What do you eat?" "Whatever we find." "How do you survive?" "We just do." That answer broke something inside Richard, because surviving should never have been a child's responsibility. That evening, Richard sat beside Emily. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "Dad?" "Why do you look sad?" Richard looked at his daughter, then at the wheelchair, then back at her. "Have you ever met someone who has less than you?" Emily nodded. "Lots of people." "No." Richard shook his head. "I mean someone who has almost nothing." Emily thought for a moment. "Jaden?" Richard nodded. "Yes." She smiled softly. "He's rich." Richard blinked. "What?" "He's rich." Emily pointed to her heart. "Just here." Richard stared at her, then slowly smiled. Maybe she was right. A week later, something unexpected happened. Emily's physical therapist arrived for her regular session. Normally, Emily hated therapy. Usually she complained, refused, argued. Today was different. She tried, actually tried. For the first time in months, The therapist couldn't believe it. Neither could Richard. After the session ended, the therapist pulled him aside. "What changed?" Richard smiled. "A homeless boy." The therapist laughed, then realized Richard wasn't joking. Over the next few weeks, Emily improved faster than anyone expected. Small improvements, tiny victories, but victories nonetheless. She smiled more, talked more, worked harder, and every day Jaden was there, dancing, laughing, encouraging her. "Come on, Emily," she laughed. "I'm trying." "No," Jaden grinned. "You can do better." She rolled her eyes. "You sound like my therapist." "Your therapist sounds smart." Emily threw a pillow at the window. Jaden dramatically pretended it hit him. She laughed so hard she nearly cried. Inside the mansion, Richard watched everything. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again. But happiness has a strange way of attracting trouble, because not everyone was happy about the growing bond between Emily and Jaden, and one person was about to enter their lives, a person who would threaten to destroy everything they had built, a person who would separate them when they needed each other most, and none of them saw it coming. For the first time in years, Richard Cole found himself looking forward to tomorrow. The mansion no longer felt empty. Emily no longer spent entire days staring into silence, and every afternoon, right on schedule, Jaden appeared. The boy never missed a day. Rain, heat, wind. Nothing stopped him. One afternoon, Emily waited anxiously by the window. 3 o'clock. No Jaden. 3:15. Still nothing. 3:30. Emily's smile began to disappear. Richard noticed immediately. "He'll come." "What if he doesn't?" "He will." But Richard wasn't as confident as he sounded. Then suddenly a familiar figure appeared. Except something was wrong. Jaden wasn't dancing. He was limping. Emily gasped. "Dad!" Richard rushed outside. As he got closer, he noticed bruises on Jaden's face, a cut above his eyebrow, and a swollen wrist. "What happened?" Jaden forced a smile. "Nothing." "Don't lie to me." The boy looked away. Finally, he sighed. "Some older guys wanted money." Richard's expression darkened. "And?" "I didn't have any." Emily watched from the window, her eyes filling with tears. Richard felt anger boiling inside him. "Did they do this to you?" Jaden nodded. "Are they still around?" The boy immediately shook his head. "No." Richard clenched his fists. He had spent decades solving problems with money and power, but seeing a child suffer like this felt different. Much different. That evening, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, he made a decision. He visited the warehouse himself, this time openly. No hiding, no spying. When Jaden saw him approaching, his eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" Richard looked around. The building was worse than he imagined. Broken windows, leaking roof, cold concrete floors. The 3 younger children were curled together beneath old blankets. "This is where you live?" Jaden nodded. "We're okay." Richard laughed bitterly. "No, you're not." The little girl stepped forward cautiously. "Are you rich?" Richard smiled slightly. "Some people say so." Her eyes widened. "Like really rich?" Jaden groaned. "Maya." "What?" The girl shrugged. "I'm curious." Richard couldn't help laughing. For the first time, he felt genuinely comfortable around them. Then Maya asked a question that shattered him.
Do rich people ever get hungry? The room went silent. Richard stared at her. The innocence in her voice made the question even more painful. "No." The little girl nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds nice." Richard looked away, because he suddenly couldn't trust himself to speak. That night he arranged food deliveries, warm meals, fresh clothes, blankets, medical supplies. But when the truck arrived the next day, Jaden refused everything. Richard was stunned. "What do you mean, no?" Jaden crossed his arms. "We can't take it." "Why not?" Because charity doesn't last forever. Richard stared. The answer sounded far too mature for a 12-year-old. What happens when you stop helping? Jaden continued. We become dependent. Richard blinked. The boy wasn't thinking like a child. He was thinking like a survivor. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Richard smiled. What if I don't stop? Jaden frowned. What? What if I'm not helping for a day? The boy looked confused. What if I'm helping for the long run? For the first time, Jaden looked uncertain. Richard could see the battle happening inside him. Hope versus fear. Trust versus disappointment. Finally, Jaden whispered, people always leave. Richard's heart sank, because that sentence told him everything he needed to know. Everyone had abandoned this boy. Everyone except Emily. And somehow, despite all of that, he still chose kindness. The following weeks brought remarkable changes. Emily's therapist was shocked. Her progress was accelerating. Small movements became stronger. Exercises became easier. Even the doctors couldn't explain it. One afternoon, Emily managed to lift herself slightly without assistance. Richard nearly cried. You did it, Emily laughed. No, she pointed outside. We did it. Jaden was dancing again, celebrating harder than she was. The bond between them had become unbreakable, which was exactly why what happened next hurt so much. One afternoon, a black car pulled into Richard's driveway. A woman stepped out, elegant, cold, confident. She introduced herself as Sandra Mitchell. The moment Richard heard her name, everything changed. Who are you? Sandra smiled. I'm Jaden's aunt. Richard froze. His what? His aunt. Richard's stomach tightened. Because Jaden had never mentioned family. Not once. The next day, Sandra arrived at the warehouse. Jaden looked horrified. What are you doing here? The woman crossed her arms. I've come for you. No, I'm your family. You abandoned me. The words hit like a hammer. Even the younger children looked shocked. Sandra's face hardened. That doesn't matter. It matters to me. The argument escalated quickly. Voices rose. Tears appeared. Old wounds reopened. For years, Sandra had ignored him. Now suddenly she wanted custody. Jaden didn't believe her intentions for a second. Neither did Richard. But the law saw things differently. A biological relative had rights, and that terrified everyone, especially Emily. When Richard explained the situation, she immediately broke down. No, her voice trembled. No, no, no. Richard pulled her close. We'll figure it out. He can't leave. We don't know that. Emily shook her head violently. They'll take him. For the first time in months, fear returned to her eyes. The same fear she carried after the accident. The same hopelessness. Richard hated seeing it. Meanwhile, Jaden felt trapped. Sandra kept pushing. Lawyers became involved. Social workers arrived. Meetings were scheduled. Questions were asked. And every day the pressure grew. One evening, Jaden sat outside the warehouse alone. Richard joined him. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Jaden finally broke the silence. I'm scared. Richard turned toward him. The confession surprised him, because Jaden always acted strong, always smiled, always protected everyone else. But tonight, he looked like what he truly was. A child. I know. What if they separate us? Richard knew exactly who us meant. Emily, Maya, the boys, the family he had built. You won't be alone. Jaden laughed bitterly. People keep saying that. Then he looked directly at Richard. But they always leave. Richard swallowed hard, because he didn't have an answer. The legal battle intensified. Weeks passed. Then the decision arrived, and it was devastating. Sandra won temporary custody. Emily collapsed into tears the moment she heard. Richard felt helpless, and Jaden stood frozen, unable to believe it. Everything he loved was being taken away, and there was nothing he could do. The day Sandra arrived to collect him felt like a funeral. Emily watched from her wheelchair, crying uncontrollably. Jaden tried to smile, But even he couldn't hold it together anymore. For the first time since Richard met him, the boy who always made everyone smile was crying. And as the car door closed behind him, nobody realized that the hardest chapter of their lives had just begun.
The silence inside the mansion became unbearable. Days passed, then weeks, and every afternoon, Emily still rolled herself to the window, still waited, still hoped, but the gate remained empty. No dancing, no laughter, no Jaden. The progress she had fought so hard for began to disappear. She stopped smiling, stopped talking, stopped trying during therapy. One afternoon, her therapist gently encouraged her. "Come on, Emily, just one more attempt." Emily looked away. "What's the point?" The therapist froze, because those were the exact words Emily used before she met Jaden. When Richard heard about it, his heart broke. Everything was slipping away again, and there was nothing he could do. Meanwhile, Jaden's new life felt like a prison. Sandra's house was beautiful, big bedrooms, good food, warm beds, everything a child was supposed to want. But Jaden hated it. Every single day. One evening, Sandra found him staring out a window. "You should be grateful." Jaden didn't answer. "I'm giving you a better life." Still nothing. Finally, he turned toward her. "A better life?" Sandra frowned. "Yes. A better life than people who actually love me?" The word struck her like a slap. "You don't understand." "No," Jaden shook his head. "You don't understand." The room fell silent, because for the first time, Sandra realized money and comfort couldn't replace genuine connection. Weeks later, Richard received a phone call. It came from Emily's doctor, and it wasn't good news. Her recovery is slowing down. Richard closed his eyes. "How bad?" "Emotionally, she's regressing." The doctor hesitated. "She's losing hope." After hanging up, Richard sat alone in his office. For years, he had believed money could solve problems. Yet once again, it was useless. His daughter didn't need another doctor. She needed her friend. Then an idea entered his mind. A crazy idea. A risky idea. But perhaps his only chance. 3 months later, the city's largest charity gala was announced. The event would raise millions for homeless children. News stations covered it. Celebrities attended. Business leaders donated. And billionaire Richard Cole personally organized every detail. The entire city talked about it. What nobody knew was that Richard had another reason for arranging the event, a reason hidden from everyone, especially Emily. The night finally arrived. The ballroom sparkled with lights. Hundreds of guests filled the venue. Cameras flashed everywhere. Emily sat beside her father, still quieter than before, still carrying sadness. Then the host stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the crowd fell silent. "Tonight, we celebrate hope." Applause followed. The host continued. "And now, we present a very special performance." The lights dimmed. Soft music began playing. Emily barely looked up until she heard a familiar voice. Her head snapped toward the stage. The spotlight switched on. A single figure stood in the center, holding a microphone, smiling nervously. Jaden. The room disappeared around her. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then tears filled her eyes. "Jaden!" Richard looked at his daughter. The expression on her face made every effort worthwhile. On stage, Jaden swallowed hard. The audience watched quietly. "This performance is for someone very special." His voice trembled. "A girl who reminded me that even when life hurts, you can still find reasons to smile." Emily burst into tears. The music grew louder. Then Jaden started dancing. Not the silly dances he usually performed, not the funny routines. This was different. Every movement told a story of pain, loss, hope, friendship, survival. The audience became completely silent. Some people started crying. Others stared in amazement. Even Sandra sat frozen in her seat, watching a side of Jaden she had never truly seen. As the performance continued, giant screens behind him displayed images. Homeless children, families overcoming hardship, people helping one another, and finally, a picture of Emily, smiling. The entire crowd turned toward her. She covered her face, overwhelmed by emotion. Then Jaden spoke again. People think heroes wear capes. The room listened. But sometimes, heroes are people who simply refuse to give up. His eyes found Emily. "You taught me that." Emily sobbed openly. The crowd joined in applause. Then something remarkable happened. Without thinking, without planning, without realizing what she was doing, Emily gripped the arms of her chair and pushed herself upward. Richard froze. The doctor froze. Everyone froze. Emily stood. Not perfectly, not easily, but she stood. The room gasped. Richard's eyes filled instantly. Emily! The little girl looked shocked herself. For years she had dreamed of standing again. Now she was doing it. The audience erupted. Cheers exploded throughout the ballroom. People rose from their seats, some crying, some shouting, some applauding, but nobody louder than Jaden. "You did it!" Emily laughed through tears, the first genuine, unstoppable laugh anyone had heard in months. Then she took a step, one small step. The crowd lost its mind. Another step, and another. Richard collapsed into his chair, overwhelmed by emotion. For years he had chased miracles. Tonight, he witnessed one. And it came from the most unexpected person imaginable. A homeless boy who once danced outside a gate. After the event ended, nobody wanted to leave. The story spread everywhere. Television channels covered it. Social media exploded. Millions watched clips of the emotional moment. But the biggest change happened behind the scenes. Sandra approached Richard privately. Her eyes were red. "I was wrong." Richard looked at her carefully. She nodded. "I thought giving him a house was enough." Silence followed. Then she continued, "But a home is different." Richard smiled. For the first time, he believed she understood. A few weeks later, Sandra made a decision nobody expected. She agreed to shared guardianship arrangements that allowed Jaden to remain close to everyone he loved. The legal battles ended. The fighting stopped. And the family finally began healing. 1 year later, life looked completely different. Emily continued improving. She still faced challenges, still attended therapy, still worked hard every day, but she never stopped believing again. Jaden enrolled in school for the first time in years. Maya and the other children found safe homes and opportunities. Richard funded shelters throughout the city, not because he wanted recognition, but because one boy had taught him something priceless. The greatest wealth wasn't measured by money. It was measured by the lives you changed. On a warm afternoon, Emily sat outside the mansion. Not behind a window, not trapped inside, outside. Beside her stood Jaden, both smiling, both stronger, both forever changed. "You know," Emily said. "What?" "You still dance terribly," Jaden laughed. "Terribly?" "Absolutely. That's rude." She grinned. "But it's my favorite dance in the world." Jaden smiled. And together, they watched the sun set. Two children from completely different worlds. Connected by kindness. Connected by hope. Connected by a friendship that changed everything. Because sometimes, the people who have the least to give end up giving the most. And sometimes, a simple act of kindness can create a miracle nobody saw coming. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to StoryTimeWorld, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder that hope can appear when you least expect it. And tell us in the comments, what was your favorite moment in this story? Until next time, remember, every story has a lesson, and every lesson has a story.